It was just past midnight when I shot awake in my chair, the TV still glowing with a rerun from New York City's Times Square news channel. The house was silent until I heard it. A single slow footstep in the hallway, then another, and then a whisper so close it felt like someone was standing right behind my door. My blood ran cold. My son's old room had been locked for 12 years, ever since the night he died. No one had a reason to go in there. No one should even be near it. If you're watching this, please like the video, subscribe, and stay till the end, because what I discovered next changed everything. I stood completely still in the hallway, my hand resting on the wall the way old women do when they're trying to steady themselves. But I wasn't steadying my body, I was steadying my mind, because what I heard next didn't feel real at all. At first, it sounded like simple movement, soft steps dragging slowly across the floorboards. But then that whisper came again, clearer this time, like someone leaning close to a door crack and speaking straight into the wood. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the house shifting. It wasn't my imagination. I had lived in that home for 50 years. I knew every sound. This was a voice, a human voice, and it came directly from my son's old room. My heart hit the inside of my chest so hard that for a moment I thought I would faint. I reached out and turned on the hallway light, but it flickered once and died. The whole corridor fell back into darkness. I wanted to call out, to say something, but I was afraid, not afraid of ghosts or spirits, but afraid of the truth. Afraid of what, or who, I might find in there. That room had been locked for more than a decade. I kept it as a place of memory, a place where the smell of my boy's life still lived in the pillows and books. Nobody had a reason to be in there. Nobody had the right. Yet the footsteps kept moving. They were slow, almost cautious, like whoever was inside didn't want to wake me, but also didn't want to leave. Every part of me wanted to run back to my bedroom and hide under the blankets like a child, but I moved forward instead. I crept closer, my slippers brushing quietly across the old rug. My breath grew short. The air around that door felt colder than the rest of the hallway, as if the room itself had changed temperature. I leaned closer, holding my breath, and for the first time I heard words, actual words. A faint whisper, shaky, hurried, as if someone was flipping through pages or searching drawers while speaking into a phone. A woman's voice, low, nervous. The sound of paper being pulled from a binder, and then silence. Total, complete silence. That silence scared me more than the whisper. Slowly, I reached for the doorknob. It was warm. That was the first thing that frightened me. Someone had touched it recently. Someone had been going in and out. Someone had been using my son's room behind my back. I tried turning the knob, but it refused to move. Locked. Again. My own son's room, locked from the inside. I swallowed hard and stepped back. Then suddenly, a soft click. The doorknob twitched on its own. I stumbled back, pressing myself against the opposite wall. The door opened just an inch, no more. A thin line of darkness slipped into the hallway. I couldn't see anyone, but I felt someone there, breathing, waiting, standing just beyond the crack. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. All I could hear was my own heartbeat thumping in my ears. Then, without warning, the whisper came again, this time right up against the door. I can't find it. Just give me time. She's sleeping. Every hair on my arm stood up. She was talking about me. Someone was inside my son's room, in the middle of the night, searching through his things, whispering about me as if I were an obstacle. I backed away slowly, inch by inch, until I reached my bedroom. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn my doorknob. I slipped inside and quietly closed the door, locking it with the small latch I hadn't touched in years. I pressed my ear against the wood and listened. Footsteps, soft, careful, moving back across the hall. Then, nothing. I stood awake until sunrise, staring at my door, my ears alert for even the smallest noise. I kept seeing the crack of that door in my mind, the voice whispering on the other side, and I knew something with absolute certainty. Something was happening inside my house, something connected to my son's past, something my daughter-in-law didn't want me to know. That night wasn't the beginning of fear, it was the beginning of truth. Because whatever was inside that room at 2 a.m., whoever whispered in that darkness, had a reason to hide. And I had a reason to find out. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen with barely any sleep in my eyes. The memory of those footsteps still echoed in my head, steady and slow, like someone tracing old pain across the floorboards. My daughter-in-law, Anna, was already sitting at the table stirring her coffee, acting as if the night before had been ordinary. I stood there for a moment, watching her, wondering if she had heard anything, or if she was pretending not to. Finally, I cleared my throat and said, "Someone was walking through the hallway at 2 in the morning, and I heard whispering from Daniel's old room." I waited for her reaction, hoping for concern, hoping for anything real. But she didn't even look surprised. She simply lowered her spoon, turned her head slightly, and gave me a small, polite smile. Not warm, not kind, not even sympathetic. It was the kind of smile people give when they think the other person is confused, foolish, or imagining things. "Mom," she said, with a sigh that felt rehearsed, "you probably dreamed that old houses make old noises." Her voice was soft, but soft in the way a blanket hides something sharp underneath. It wasn't comfort, it was dismissal, a gentle way of telling me to let it go, a gentle way of telling me she didn't believe me. But the worst part wasn't the words, it was her eyes. When she looked at me, they weren't confused or worried. They were flat, calm, almost calculating, as if she already knew what I was going to say, and already had the answer prepared. There was no curiosity in her face, no surprise that I heard a whisper, no shock that someone was in Daniel's room at that hour. Her expression didn't belong to someone who was hearing this for the first time. It belonged to someone who knew something and didn't want me digging deeper. I watched her closely, trying to stay calm. For years, ever since my husband died, she had been living with me. She insisted she was helping, but some days it felt like she was watching more than helping, watching what I touched, where I walked, what papers I kept, what keys I used. I convinced myself it was my imagination, that grief makes shadows look like people and doubts look like warnings. But that morning, when I saw her unbothered expression, something clicked inside me, something small but sharp. She knew something. No one hears about footsteps at 2 a.m. and whispers through the walls and reacts with a tiny smile. No one hears about a room belonging to the dead, a room no one ever enters, and shrugs it off. Her calmness was too calm, her patience was too practiced, and the way she spoke to me, gently but with that cold edge under the surface, reminded me of how people talk to someone they want to keep quiet. She stood up then, rinsed her cup in the sink, and said, "You should rest more. You're stressing yourself over nothing." Then she placed her hand on my shoulder. A gentle touch, but her palm felt cold, not warm, a polite gesture that didn't match her eyes. I stayed silent. Sometimes silence is louder than questions. Sometimes silence lets you watch a person without them noticing. And in that moment, I watched her closely. The way her jaw tightened for a second, the way her eyes drifted toward the hallway as if checking something in her mind, the way she avoided looking at Daniel's door. She walked toward the living room, humming some tune under her breath, acting like life was normal. But something inside me shifted. Her smile, her tone, her calmness. They weren't comfort. They were warning signs. Warning signs that the truth wasn't in the footsteps. The truth wasn't in the whisper. The truth was in her reaction, and how carefully she tried to brush it away. I sat at the table alone after she left the room. Her coffee cup still held a thin ring of foam around the edge, and I stared at it like it could explain everything I thought back to the nights when I found the key to Daniel's room missing. The times I heard soft thumps on the stairs, the strange smell of cologne that wasn't mine, wasn't hers, the way she had grown strangely protective of certain drawers and cabinets. And now, her cold little smile, All the small moments that I told myself were just my imagination suddenly lined up like puzzle pieces. And the picture they formed was not comforting. Something was happening in this house. Something she didn't want me to know. And now I knew one thing for sure. I was not dreaming. She was hiding, and whatever she was hiding was behind Daniel's door. When I closed the kitchen door after talking to her that morning, I stood still in the hallway and looked toward the closed door of my son's room, the same room she told me I was dreaming about, the same room she dismissed with that soft, polite smile. I knew that smile. It was the smile people use when they think an old woman is losing her mind. And maybe that was the part that hurt the most. Not the footsteps, not the whisper, but the fact that she believed I wouldn't notice something happening in the house I had lived in for more than 40 years. I leaned my hand on the wall and took a breath. If there was one thing age had given me, it was patience and memory. My memory of that room was stronger than her smile could ever erase. That room belonged to Daniel, my only son, the child I carried through sickness, storms, and every hard season of life. The child I watched grow into a man who still kissed my forehead every night before he went to bed. He wasn't perfect, but he was mine. My heart still tightens when I think of the day he told me he had fallen in love. His hands shaking, his voice soft, his eyes bright with hope. I remember his wedding day clearly. The white flowers tied on the chairs, the smell of fresh paint in the small church he insisted on using, and the way he hugged me before walking down the aisle. That hug stayed in my bones. It felt like a promise that no matter where life took him, he would always come back to me. But life doesn't always keep promises. Sometimes it tears them apart in one violent moment. The night he died, he wasn't on his way to work or out wasting time. He was coming home to surprise me for my birthday. We were supposed to have dinner together, just the two of us, like we used to when he was small. He even messaged me, "Be ready, Mom." I waited and waited. Hours passed, and I thought he got busy. But the knock at the door came instead, the kind that stops your heart before you even open it. They told me it was a car accident. Quick, sudden, no pain. They always say, no pain. Maybe they say it because it sounds kinder, but there is nothing kind about losing your child. Nothing. After his funeral, the house became a museum of memories. I kept his room exactly as he left it. The bed neatly made, the books on his desk stacked the way he liked, the jacket he wore often still hanging on the back of the chair. I locked the room with the little silver key he once placed in my hand after moving out. "Keep it safe," he had said, and I did. Every single day, the key stayed in the drawer of my nightstand, untouched, unmoved. Except now I noticed it wasn't always where I left it. One morning, it was on the dresser. Another time, halfway under the bed. I kept telling myself maybe I misplaced it. Maybe grief was playing tricks on my mind. But grief doesn't unlock doors. People do. When my daughter-in-law moved in after my husband died, I welcomed her without hesitation. I believed she needed the comfort of family. I believed Daniel would have wanted me to take care of her. I paid her debts, cleaned the house, cooked her meals, and gave her the room next to mine so she wouldn't feel alone. But little by little, she changed the energy of the home. She talked less, locked doors more often, whispered into her phone at night. And when I passed my son's room, I sometimes smelled a faint cologne. His cologne, the one I kept sealed in his drawer. I thought my mind was remembering too hard, too painfully. But then the noises began. The footsteps, the whispers, the creaking of a door I never opened. But the moment that finally shifted, something inside me happened one afternoon while dusting. I saw the photograph of Daniel and his wife from their wedding day, the same photo that had been hanging in the hallway for years. Only now the glass frame was cracked, not a little crack from age, a deliberate one, a straight line across Daniel's face, like someone had pressed hard on the glass with their thumb. I stared at it for a long time. Something cold settled in my stomach. A mother knows when grief floats in the air, but this wasn't grief. This was intrusion. Someone had been in that room. Someone had been touching his things. Someone had been using the key that was no longer exactly where I left it. I stood there, holding the frame against my chest, and I realized something deeper than fear. My daughter-in-law wasn't grieving anymore. She was searching for something she didn't want me to see. And whatever was pulling her into that room at 2 a.m., whispering in the dark, wasn't love for my son. It was something far colder. The days that followed felt heavier than normal, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I tried to tell myself that grief was simply playing tricks on me, that my mind was filling the silence with old memories that refused to die. But deep down, something felt wrong, very wrong. It started with small things anyone else would ignore, but a mother notices everything connected to her child. One morning, when I walked past Daniel's room, the door was not fully shut. I always kept it closed, always. Yet there it was, open by an inch, like someone had slipped inside and forgotten to hide their tracks. I stood there for a long moment, staring at that gap, feeling my stomach tighten the way it did on the day I lost him. I pushed the door gently, expecting to find everything the same: the neatly made bed, his football on the shelf, the stack of books that still carried his handwriting, but the air felt different. Not cold, not warm, just different, like someone had breathed in there recently. When I closed the door again, I ran my hand over the keyhole and noticed the faintest scrape around it, thin lines that weren't there before. Someone had been inside, and whatever reason they had, it wasn't innocent. I went to my nightstand to check the key again, and just as I feared, it wasn't in the exact place I had left it. It had been moved, even if only slightly. That was the moment the unease inside me fully awakened. A few days later, I was baking in the kitchen when a familiar scent drifted down the hallway. I turned off the oven and followed it. It was cologne, Daniel's cologne. He hadn't used it in 12 years, and I hadn't opened that bottle in almost as long. I followed the scent right to his door, and again, it was open just a hair. My heart pounded so loudly, I could hear it in my ears. I reached for the knob and closed it with a firm click. When I turned around, my daughter-in-law was standing at the end of the hallway, her hair pulled back, arms crossed. She smiled at me, but it wasn't warm. "You okay, Mom?" she asked, in a voice too soft, too controlled. I nodded, even though every bone in my body told me not to trust that smile. Later that night, I walked past his room again and noticed the curtains inside were moving slightly. A draft? Maybe. But the window was shut tight earlier. I stepped closer, and this time, the smell wasn't cologne. It was something metallic, like old coins rubbed together. A smell I had never associated with Daniel's room. I asked her again the next morning if she had gone in there. She said no. Too fast, too sharp, too ready. I didn't say a word, but my mind kept replaying her answer the entire day. Over the next week, the noises grew stranger. Once, around midnight, I heard a soft humming coming from behind the door. Not a song, more like a low, steady vibration. When I stepped out into the hallway, it stopped instantly, as if someone heard me approach. Another time, when I went to dust the shelves, I noticed a thin trail of soil near the doorframe soil. Inside my house, we had no plants upstairs, no reason for dirt to be there. When I asked my daughter-in-law about it, she didn't even pretend to think. She simply shrugged and said, "You probably dropped something." But I knew I didn't, and the way she rushed past me, almost too quickly, made me even more certain she knew exactly where that soil had come from. Her behavior changed too. She avoided eye contact. Her voice became shorter. She would disappear for long periods of time at night, only to reappear with the same calm face, as if she had done nothing unusual. Sometimes I heard her phone vibrating behind closed doors with whispers that stopped the moment I walked past. She began locking her bedroom door, something she never used to do, and more than once I caught her standing near Daniel's old room in the dark, pretending to look at her phone. One afternoon, when I went to fold laundry, I found a small smear of rust near the basket. Rust, or maybe blood, I couldn't tell. My hands trembled as I wiped it, because nothing in my house should have been rusty or stained. Every day, the tension grew thicker, like invisible strings pulling tighter around my chest. I wanted to ask her again, to demand answers, but the look in her eyes each time she smiled told me she was hiding something deeper than mistakes or mess. She was hiding a truth, a heavy one. By the end of the week, I realized something painful. It wasn't Daniel I heard at night. It wasn't my imagination, or grief, or ghosts. Someone living, breathing, and very real was going into that room. Someone who knew I wouldn't sleep through the fear forever. Someone who thought I would stay quiet. But a mother can feel danger the same way she feels love. Deep, instinctive, impossible to ignore. And the danger was growing. I was sure of it. I tried to tell myself the strange noises, the faint cologne smell, the opened window, the unlocked door, all of it could be stress or age or simple forgetfulness. That's what people my age usually assume when the world around them starts acting different. But I knew my own mind, I knew my own home, and I knew the feeling of something being wrong. That feeling grew heavier each day, settling in my chest like a weight I carried from room to room. Still, nothing prepared me for the moment I realized the things disappearing from Daniel's room were not accidents or misplacements. They were taken, chosen, removed with purpose. It started with something small, a wooden bookmark Daniel carved when he was 12. I kept it inside his favorite novel, the one he read over and over until the pages started loosening from the spine one morning. When I opened the book just to feel close to him, the bookmark was gone. I stood there staring at the empty space between the pages for a long time. That bookmark had no money value, no reason for anyone else to want it. It only meant something to me and to him. Losing it felt like someone had touched a memory with dirty hands. A few days later, his old wristwatch disappeared. The same watch he insisted on wearing, even though it barely worked. The leather was cracked, the metal tarnished, but he loved it because his father gave it to him before he passed away. That watch had survived years of wear, a car crash, hospital visits, but it didn't survive the silence of my home now. I searched everywhere under the pillows, behind the books, inside the drawers. Nothing. That was when I stopped telling myself comforting lies. That was when fear turned into certainty. The next thing that vanished was the photograph. The last picture taken of Daniel and me together. It was a simple picture, nothing fancy, just the two of us at the lake, sunlight behind us, his arm around me, the water sparkling in the background. I had kept it on his bedside table for 12 years. I dusted it every morning. I whispered to it sometimes when the nights got too long. When I saw the empty spot where it used to sit, something inside me cracked. I didn't cry at first. I just stood there, gripping the edge of the table so tightly my nails pressed white. I walked straight to the living room where my daughter-in-law was scrolling on her phone. I asked her, as calmly as I could, if she had moved anything from Daniel's room. She didn't even look at me when she answered. She just smirked and said, "Why would I go into that dusty place? Maybe you misplaced it." Her tone was sharp, dismissive, the kind used on someone you don't respect, the kind that makes your stomach twist. She added, "Maybe you're forgetting things again." She said it like an accusation, not a concern. That sentence cut deeper than anything else that had happened that week, because she knew I wasn't forgetting. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she was trying to make me doubt myself so I wouldn't question her again. That cold confidence in her voice told me the truth. She had been in that room not once, not by mistake, regularly, comfortably, with intention. That night I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, staring at the hallway where the faint outline of Daniel's old door stood in the dark. A door that used to keep a child safe was now being used to hide someone else's secrets. And as the house settled into its usual quiet, I realized something important. People don't steal worthless things. They steal things that serve a purpose. And in this case, the purpose wasn't sentimental, it was financial. I started noticing other little signs. A drawer slightly misaligned, papers moved, a faint trace of someone's perfume near his closet. Once, I even found the key, the one that was always kept safely locked away, placed neatly on the table outside my room, as if someone wanted to return it before I asked too many questions. But all that did was confirm what I already knew. She had been inside. She had been touching his things. She had been taking what wasn't hers. As I lay in bed that night, I made a promise to myself. I would not let my memories be stolen. I would not let Daniel's things vanish piece by piece. And I would not let lies replace truth in the home I once shared with the people I loved. Whatever she was doing, whatever she planned, I was going to find out, and this time, I wouldn't look away. That night, after losing Daniel's watch, after watching her pretend not to notice how shaken I was, I finally understood something very simple. Whatever was happening in that room at 2 a.m. was not an accident, not grief, not sentiment. It was intention, purpose, a plan slowly crawling out of the shadows. I had spent weeks telling myself I was being paranoid, that I was imagining things because the house felt too big and too quiet without my husband. But you can only ignore the truth for so long before it forces its way out. And that night, the truth finally stepped into the hallway, one slow footstep at a time. I didn't turn on any light. I didn't clear my throat or shift on the mattress. I lay still, listening. At exactly the same time it had all begun, 2 a.m. sharp, I heard the soft thud of a door closing somewhere down the hall. Then came the footsteps. Light, careful, almost practiced. Not the footsteps of someone who belonged in that hallway, who moved with the confidence of ownership. These were secretive steps. The kind that hoped the floorboards wouldn't complain, and they were moving toward Daniel's room again. My heart began to pound, not out of fear, but out of something sharper. A mother always knows when something precious is slipping out of her hands, even if she cannot yet see the thief. I slid my feet to the floor, taking care not to let the frame creak under my weight. For a moment, I simply stood still, letting my eyes adjust to the dark, letting my hearing guide me, when the final click of Daniel's door latch echoed, that tiny sound like a pin dropping onto glass. I moved. I followed barefoot, each step slow and close to the wall so the old wooden boards wouldn't groan under me. When I reached his door, I stopped. The house was silent, except for the faint rustle of paper inside the room. My hands trembled, but not with weakness, with anger. With clarity, I knew, before I even saw her, that whatever she was doing in there wasn't innocent. I leaned forward and pressed my eye to the thin gap between the door and the frame. What I saw made every hair on my body stand on end. She was kneeling on the floor in front of Daniel's old desk, the same desk where he used to draw pictures for me when he was a boy, the same desk where his high school graduation card still sat tucked away in the drawer. And she wasn't crying or praying or remembering him. She was sorting through his papers, and not just sorting. She was picking out specific ones. She held a flashlight between her teeth, the beam shaking slightly as she shuffled through envelopes, documents, folders, insurance papers, account forms, his old medical files. The last folder he ever kept locked in his desk. She had cracked it open. I could see it clearly now. And then, as if the moment wasn't already tearing me apart, she lifted her phone and whispered into it. Yes, the insurance papers are here. No, she doesn't know anything. Just let me get the signatures copied. The mother won't notice a thing. She sleeps early. My chest tightened so hard I thought my heart would stop. She waited a moment before whispering again, "Once this is done, the payout will come. I told you, we'll get the money." Money, insurance, payout. Every word hit like a hammer. My breath felt heavy, sharp, poisonous. I stepped back before I could push the door open and scream, but I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I forced myself to walk backward one step at a time, breathing through my nose, calming the storm inside me. I reached my room, closed the door without a sound, and sat on the edge of the bed until the shaking left my hands. She wasn't grieving. She wasn't remembering him. She was stealing from him, from Daniel, from my dead son, from the boy whose room she entered in the middle of the night like a thief. She wanted his insurance money. She wanted to sign papers behind my back. She wanted to claim what never belonged to her, and she planned to use his memory to do it. The worst part wasn't even the theft. It was her voice. Calm, cold, patient, like she had been planning this for a long, long time. When she finally left the room and went to sleep, I stayed awake until sunrise, sitting in that same dark, letting the truth settle into my bones. A mother feels many kinds of pain in her life: childbirth, grief, loss, but the pain of betrayal from someone you opened your home to, that pain is different. It hardens you in ways you don't expect. By morning, the fear I felt had turned into something else: resolve. Because now I knew exactly what she was doing, and I knew exactly how to stop her. I woke up the next morning with a heaviness in my chest that felt different from fear. It wasn't confusion anymore. It wasn't doubt. It was clarity, the kind that arrives only after you've seen the truth with your own eyes. I sat at the dining table with my cup of tea, untouched, growing colder by the minute. The house was quiet, except for the faint tick of the kitchen clock. For the first time in years, the silence did not comfort me. It warned me. It told me I was living with someone who wasn't grieving with me. She was using me, using Daniel's memory, using my home, using everything good left in this house. I kept seeing her kneeling in that room, Daniel's room, touching his things without permission, whispering into her phone about insurance papers and signatures she had no right to even mention. The idea that she was trying to take something that belonged to my son, even after he was gone, burned through me like acid. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about property. It was deeper than that. It was about respect, about sacredness, about the dignity of a son I buried with my own hands, and the daughter-in-law who lived under my roof had been sneaking around at 2 a.m., trying to benefit from his death. I knew I couldn't handle this alone. Grief weakens your voice. Pain clouds your judgment. But I needed someone who knew the law, someone who understood Daniel, someone who could guide me without letting emotions take over. There was only one person who came to mind: my late husband's lawyer, Mr. Carter. He was the one who handled every detail when Daniel died, the one who comforted me gently when he explained that, and no amount of justice could bring a child back. He had known my family like his own. If anyone could help me now, it was him. My hands trembled when I picked up the phone, but I dialed his number anyway. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm and familiar. "Ma'am, are you all right? It's early for you to call." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. "I need you to come to the house. Today it's about Daniel." The silence on the line told me he understood the seriousness without another word. He arrived within an hour. When I opened the door, he looked at my face and didn't ask meaningless questions. He simply stepped inside, closed the door behind him, and waited for me to speak. I took him to the living room and showed him the photographs on my phone, the ones I had managed to take last night. Pictures of her in Daniel's room, holding documents that never belonged to her, pictures of the receipts she had printed, pictures of her touching his birth certificate, death certificate, old bank letters, things she had no business even looking at. When he finished going through them, he leaned back slowly, rubbing his forehead. "This is not good," he said quietly. "She's been trying to access his insurance. The account is sealed. Only you had rights to it. She isn't just snooping, she's committing fraud." His voice was calm, but I could hear the anger beneath it. Not loud anger, righteous anger, the kind that grows in people who still believe in justice. He asked me where she kept her phone at night. I told him she kept it near her pillow. He nodded thoughtfully. "Then she's contacting someone. Probably someone helping her. She couldn't attempt this alone. She doesn't have the knowledge or access." Hearing that made my stomach twist. She wasn't just lying to me. She was working with someone else, planning something bigger than I imagined. He asked if there were more papers missing. I hadn't checked everything yet. I couldn't bring myself to enter Daniel's room again that morning. The memory of seeing her there still made my knees weak. He offered to check with me. We walked down the hallway together, and for the first time since the whispers began, I didn't feel alone. He opened the door gently, turned on the light, and stood still for a long moment, as if acknowledging the weight of the space. Together, we checked the drawers, the shelves, the old metal box where I kept Daniel's documents. More papers were missing. Some were out of order, some were copied and put back incorrectly. As Mr. Carter examined each detail, his expression grew darker. "She's been planning this for weeks," he said, voice low. "Maybe months. She waited until you were grieving, until you were weak. She thought you wouldn't notice." Those words hit me like a slap. Grief makes you quiet, but it does not make you blind. We returned to the living room, and he placed his hand on mine gently, the way someone does when giving hard news to an old friend. "You're not safe with her in this house, and Daniel's memory is not safe with her either. You need to act before she does more damage." I nodded slowly, feeling strength returning to me, strength I didn't know I still had. He took out his notebook and began writing down steps. Legal steps, protective steps. Steps to secure Daniel's documents and to keep her from pretending she had any rights over his estate. He promised he would file the necessary papers before the day ended. "You trusted her," he said softly. "Now trust me. We will protect you. We will protect Daniel." For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. And for the first time in years, I felt Daniel was finally being protected, even in death. That evening, I set the table the way I always did. 2 plates, 2 glasses, 1 small bowl of vegetables. The house was quiet, but the quiet was different now. It wasn't fear. It wasn't confusion. It was the silence that comes right before a storm you already know how to control. I moved slowly. On purpose, I wanted my hands steady, my breath steady, my heart steady. I wanted her to look at me and see a woman who wasn't scared anymore, a woman who finally understood everything. I heard her footsteps in the hallway before she entered, light steps, confident, as if she owned the house, the night, and even me. She walked into the kitchen humming, acting warm, acting innocent. She took one look at the plates and said in her usual cheerful tone, "Dinner? You didn't have to, Mom." She always called me Mom when she wanted something or when she was pretending I didn't answer. I didn't smile. I didn't even blink. I simply slid the photographs across the table with the same calmness she had used when lying to my face. Her smile faded instantly. Her body stiffened. Her eyes locked onto the photographs, the ones I had taken the night before, showing her in Daniel's room, holding his documents, whispering into her phone, telling someone that I would never know. She didn't move at first. She didn't breathe. She looked like someone who had just seen her own reflection for the first time and didn't like what stared back. "I know," I said quietly. My voice didn't tremble. My hands didn't shake. I felt no fear, no anger, only clarity, the kind that comes when truth finally steps into the light. "You've been in his room. You've been touching his things. You've been taking his documents. You've been trying to open accounts that don't belong to you." She swallowed hard. Her eyes darted toward the hallway, toward her purse, toward the front door, anywhere but at me. "I can explain," she whispered. Her voice cracked, not from sadness, but from panic. "It's not what you think." I leaned back in my chair and looked directly at her. "Then explain." She took a deep breath, trying to gather words fast enough to save herself. I just wanted what Daniel would have wanted," she said. "He always wanted his family to be secure, I thought." I cut her off. "Daniel wanted honesty," I said. "Not secrets, not locked doors, not midnight calls, not lies." She opened her mouth again, but nothing came out this time. Her face had gone pale, almost gray, as if all the stolen plans were draining out of her faster than she could hold on to them. For the first time since she moved into my home, she realized I wasn't weak. I wasn't confused. I wasn't someone she could manipulate. I was his mother, and I was done being silent. You entered his room without my permission, I continued, keeping my voice even. You took things that weren't yours. You looked for papers that didn't belong to you. You tried to act as his surviving family. But you are not. You are his widow, not his heir. You have no right to anything he left. Her eyes filled with tears now, not because she felt guilty, but because she understood the weight of what she had done. She understood how much trouble she was in. Please, she whispered. I raised my hand, stopping her. You will leave this house by morning. Her breath hitched. She shook her head slowly, as if I had spoken in a language she didn't understand. What? Mom? No. I have nowhere to go. I didn't mean... I leaned forward, my voice calm but unshakable. If you are still here after sunrise, I will take this recording to the police, the lawyer, and the insurance office. They will handle the rest. She stared at me, stunned, as if she could not believe that the quiet, grieving mother she thought she could fool had become the person ending her game. She tried one last time to soften her voice. I love Daniel, she whispered. I shook my head. If you loved him, you would have protected his memory. Instead, you tried to profit from it. She looked at the photographs one last time, the evidence of her betrayal, then pushed her chair back and stood. Her legs shook, her hands shook. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, staring at me, realizing this was the end. Not because I shouted, not because I threatened, but because I finally saw the truth clearly. Leave by morning, I repeated. And this time, she didn't argue. The house was silent after she left, but it was not the painful kind of silence I had lived with for months. It was a clean silence, an honest silence, the kind that fills a home when danger finally walks out the front door. I sat in the living room for a long time, still holding the folded photographs from the night before. The clock ticked on the wall, steady and calm, like it was reminding me that my life was moving forward again. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel afraid of the dark. I didn't feel watched. I didn't feel like a prisoner in my own home. I felt like a mother who had finally stood up for her child, even if that child wasn't here to see it. In the early morning hours, I walked slowly to Daniel's room. My hand hovered over the doorknob longer than I expected. I had spent so many nights imagining footsteps behind that door, wondering what she was taking, what she was planning, what she was destroying. Opening it now felt like opening a wound, but it had to be done. When I finally turned the knob, the faint smell of dust greeted me. The room was still. His bed was untouched. His books lined the shelves, some crooked from when she had searched through them. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain open. Sunlight spilled across his pillow, soft and warm. It reminded me of the mornings when he was young, when I used to wake him up for school, brushing his hair away from his face and whispering that the world was waiting for him. I sat down on his bed and let the quiet settle around me. For a moment, I imagined he would walk through the door, laughing at something silly, telling me a new story from work. But the room stayed still, and I knew the truth. He wasn't coming back. But the danger that had been circling his memory was gone. I wasn't too late. I had protected what little of him remained. That was all a mother can do, even years after her child is gone. After a long time, I walked to his desk. The drawers she had rummaged through were half open. I closed each one gently, as if putting his life back in order, piece by piece. I found the small wooden cross he made at school, the one she had thrown aside while looking for the insurance documents. I wiped the dust off it with my sleeve and held it to my chest. Then I placed it back in its place on the shelf, standing tall, exactly where it belonged. It felt like setting a wrong right again. By noon, my mind was steady enough to call the lawyer. He answered on the first ring, his voice calm and reassuring. I told him she had left, and he sighed with relief. "Good," he said. "I'll finish sealing Daniel's account today. She can't touch anything now." I thanked him and hung up, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I walked through the house after that, closing windows she had opened, locking doors she had crept through, checking every corner until the house felt like mine again. Each step felt like reclaiming a part of myself I had lost. Later in the afternoon, I brewed tea and sat on the porch with the cup warming my hands. A few neighbors passed by, waving gently, unaware of the storm that had been raging inside my home for weeks. I didn't tell them anything. Not because I was ashamed, but because I finally understood something. Not every battle needs an audience. Some victories are meant to be quiet, known only to the heart that fought for them. I wasn't looking for applause. I wasn't looking for pity. I only wanted peace, and now it was finally settling around me. That evening, I returned to Daniel's room one last time. I stood in the doorway, looking at everything as it was, untouched, safe, protected. I closed the door slowly, not out of fear, but out of respect. I knew I wouldn't be opening it as often anymore. Some rooms are meant to stay peaceful. When the door clicked shut, I felt a final piece of fear leave my body. The house felt whole again. I felt whole again. She was gone. Her lies were gone. Her hands would never touch his things again. And for the first time since the footsteps began, I slept through the night without waking in fear. No whispers, no movement. Just the quiet hum of a home that finally belonged to me and to the memories of the boy I loved more than anything in this world. After she left, life inside the house changed in ways I didn't expect. At first, the silence felt sharp, almost too loud, because for months I had grown used to the late-night footsteps, the whispers, the feeling of someone watching the house that didn't belong there. It took time for my body to understand that danger was gone. For the first few mornings, I still found myself stepping lightly, checking corners, listening for sounds that weren't there. Habit stays even after fear leaves, especially when that fear comes from someone you trusted inside your own home. I kept the basement key in my pocket for days, not because I planned to open the room again, but because holding it reminded me of why I acted. Action is hard for someone my age. Fear tries to make you doubt yourself, make you think you imagined everything, make you question whether you're too old, too emotional, too forgetful. That is exactly what she had tried to make me believe. Every lie she told, every quick excuse, every cold smile was meant to make me look confused and to make herself look innocent. Now that she was gone, that weight finally lifted. I could stand straight again without feeling judged in my own hallway. I spent a full afternoon inside Daniel's room one last time. I sat on his bed and held the little cross he carved when he was 10. I wiped his desk clean, dusted every corner, and placed the photograph of us at the lake back on the shelf. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but instead I felt something steadier. The feeling that I had finally taken care of him the way he once tried to take care of me. Protecting a child doesn't end when they die. Love stretches longer than life. What I did wasn't revenge. It was protection that came years late, but still came in time to save his memory. People in town eventually asked where she went. I gave a simple answer. She moved. I didn't tell them the truth, because the truth wasn't for gossip. It was for the lawyer, the documents, and the line she crossed when she touched what never belonged to her. Some neighbors had noticed her walking around my yard at night, but no one said anything before. After she left, they brought casseroles and asked if I needed anything. I didn't. What I needed most was peace, and I finally had it. Her family called once. They asked why she had left upset. I told them, ask her. They didn't call again after that. Guilt has a way of making people go quiet when they know they cannot defend the one they raised. I didn't feel angry. I just felt tired of people who pretend innocence while holding the knife behind their back. My granddaughter visited a week later. She asked why the house felt lighter. Children sense things adults pretend not to see. I told her the truth in simple words, that some people lie because they want something that isn't theirs. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is show the truth to someone who thinks you will stay silent. She hugged me and said she was proud of me. It meant more than anything else that happened. Some nights, I still hear sounds in the house, but they're only memories shifting around inside old rooms. Trauma echoes longer than footsteps, but I no longer wake with fear. I wake with purpose. Daniel's room stays locked now, not out of sadness, but out of respect. His things are safe, his story is safe, and his mother, me, finally did the job she should have done earlier. She stood up for him, protected him, and stopped the person who thought she could profit from a dead man. A few days ago, I sat outside with a cup of tea, watching the sun move across the porch. I realized I wasn't afraid of the night anymore. I wasn't afraid of silence. I wasn't afraid of losing control of the home I kept for decades. That fear had left with her suitcase. Sometimes I think I hear Daniel, not footsteps this time, just his voice in my memory, saying the words he always said before leaving the house. "Don't worry, Mom, I'm right here." And for the first time in years, I believe it. Not because he's here in body, but because I finally did for him what every mother hopes she can do: protect her child even after the world thinks the story is over. And now, when I pass his old room, I place my hand on the door softly and say the same thing back. "I protected you, son. I did it. You can rest." So here is my question to you, watching this or reading this. If someone tried to steal your child's memory, your family's honor, and your peace, would you stay silent? Or would you stand up, even at your age, and fight for the truth like I did?